Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2. A video game with a crazy amount of different arcade iterations, console conversions, and different platform releases. There are more versions of Street Fighter 2 than anyone could ever be asked to reasonably be able to keep up with. It's all actually insane. Street Fighter 2 really is the video game that just keeps on giving, or at the very least, keeps giving Capcom money as we continue to buy it over and over again. In this video game's peak heyday, the most well-known home conversions of the title could obviously be experienced on 16-bit home consoles, i.e. the Super Nintendo and Sega Mega Drive. But what you may not know is that the game was also made available on lesser hardware. As recently as just last week, we have already looked at many of the unlicensed NES conversions of the game that were created by Hummer Team over in Taiwan. But what is perhaps even more interesting is that an officially licensed 8-bit version of the game was created to be played on Sega consoles. As my thumbnail suggests, I'm of course talking about Street Fighter 2, the Master System version of the game. A conversion that not only was restricted to see it released in just one region, but a video game that wasn't produced until 6 years after Street Fighter 2 hit arcades. So, what on earth was going on here? Let's find out. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is the story of Street Fighter 2 for the Sega Master System. Yeah! There is no doubt at this point regarding just how influential and important Street Fighter 2 is. This is a game that is undisputedly one of the most iconic in all of history. Not only is it often credited with rejuvenating the arcade market and giving the scene a second wind when it was flailing, but it impressed in the homes, helping it take over the world. As a small London child, we would have one of these cabinets in just about every pub on every street corner of the city. It did not matter which public house my family would visit. The choice was always the same: darts, pool, or bloody Street Fighter 2. The game was everywhere. In fact, I love Street Fighter 2 so much that I've even built a Street Fighter 2 cabinet to play in my house, bringing the phrase, bringing the arcade experience home, to a new level. It offered everything from an alluring array of stunningly animated characters equipped with their own fighting style, to command-based special moves, 6-button configuration, and an innovative combo system. Street Fighter 2 is love, Street Fighter 2 is life. During the following year, 1992, the game was ported over to the Super Nintendo. The game was in such high demand that it was even included as a packing game for many Super Nintendo units. In fact, as mentioned on this channel before, the game was such a smash hit that it was the title that convinced many people around the world to invest in a Super Nintendo in the first place, and helped Nintendo gain a footing in many regions where they had never managed to find popularity previously. Past this point, as we know, Street Fighter 2 was eventually ported to what seemed like every system under the sun, with ports of the game still coming out even on modern hardware today, such as the Nintendo Switch for example. The port we are zoning in on today though is the Master System version of the game, which I feel is amongst one of the quirkiest and perhaps craziest of them all. One of the most surprising aspects of this game's existence is that Street Fighter 2 for the Sega Master System did not arrive until 1997, 6 years after the initial arcade release and 5 years after the 16-bit Super Nintendo port. So, what on earth was going on here? And why was this Capcom classic officially released on an 8-bit system when most gamers now had platforms such as the Sony PlayStation, Nintendo 64 and Sega Saturn? Hell, we were only 1 year away from a Sega Dreamcast, moving towards Shenmue territory. The answer to this question is a pure and simple one, consisting of one word: Tectoy. Tectoy is the Brazilian electronics company that holds a licensing agreement with Sega, and they have ridiculously been regularly manufacturing Sega systems right up until this very day. The company have a particular affinity with the Master System and found great success marketing the console in the developing world throughout a period when many gamers had moved on. From everything I hear online, many Brazilians owned more modern hardware that was often procured through the grey market. However, Sega Tectoy products were the way to go if you wanted a system both legally and cheaply. Sega Tectoy's competitive advantage mainly came from the fact that they would manufacture the systems directly in Brazil. In contrast, other consoles coming in from outside Brazil would come paired with ludicrous import tariffs, which consumers would be expected to pay. For this reason, the Sega Master System has had an extremely extended life in Brazil, which explains why games such as Street Fighter II were released as late as 1997. In fact, a whole range of titles such as this one were developed exclusively for the South American market, leading to all sorts of strange and insane regional exclusives. This game, along with many other titles, were programmed directly by Tectoy. In Street Fighter II's case, the license would obviously be acquired from Capcom. However, the circumstances surrounding this are not entirely to be as expected. As mentioned, it is surprising to see such a game appear on a system in the year it did. This is because not many companies would be happy to see their current releases on such old products. Reportedly, this same line of thought applied to Capcom, and Tectoy's pitch to have the game published was rather amusing. Reportedly, legend now tells us that Tectoy would show off and pitch their Street Fighter II title to Capcom employees as a Sega Mega Drive one, which obviously resulted in disgust, as the game is not on the level of the likes of even Special Champion Edition. As a result, Capcom stated to Tectoy that they would need to improve it a lot to be allowed to use the Street Fighter II license. In an amusing twist though, as they were showing the footage of their Street Fighter II build, Tectoy would place the Sega Master System atop the table, displaying that the game was running off of simple 8-bit hardware. A Capcom employee was stunned by this revelation and is quoted to have said to the CEO of Tectoy, Stefano Arnold, "I've never seen a game taking so much from the Master System CPU as you did. I think we will allow you to release it." So with all of this said, the rest is history. Tectoy would release the Street Fighter II game for the Master System in 1997. So let's discuss the game and whether it lives up to its reputation as the most technically impressive Sega Master System title. For those playing this, the game lets you pick from 8 different playable characters. Interestingly though, different from the game's original arcade incarnation from 1991, Dhalsim and E-Honda are absent, instead switched out for Balrog and M. Bison. I would assume that this simple change was due to the system's technical limitations, as a playthrough of this title consists of 8 fighters as opposed to the traditional 12 where you take on the bosses. For an 8-bit title, the game is every bit as pretty as its reputation suggests, with its graphics being leaps and bounds ahead of some of the system's favourites, such as Alex Kidd in Miracle World for example. The game looks like Street Fighter II and is impressively fluid for a game running on the Sega Master System. Despite the fluidity, the game has clearly dropped some animation frames, however it still delivers far more than what you would traditionally expect from an 8-bit title. Hit detection is excellent and special moves remain in place, however you're somewhat restricted in what you can do. Remember that Sega Master System controllers only feature 2 buttons in contrast to Arcade Cabinet's usual 6. Regardless of the 2 buttons, in my opinion, the game still handles surprisingly well, and in my own playthrough, I have had no problems giving my opponents a bloody good thrashing. Away from controlling the characters and their animation quirks, I should discuss the stage backgrounds. You may notice that on many stages some assets from the backdrops appear to be missing, with more stuff missing from some stages than others. As for the music, it is one of my favourite elements of the game. There is just something magical about hearing the fantastic soundtrack of Street Fighter II rearranged for an 8-bit Sega system. This game in many ways is a tremendous demake. Many years before, demakes were even considered cool, and the music in the game highlights this. All in all, this is certainly not the definitive port of Street Fighter II. However, the game's history is fascinating, and its quirky nature makes this one worth playing in my opinion. I find this game's existence so novel, so it's a real treat for me to see in action. Is this game for everyone? Obviously, I'm going to say the answer to this question is hell no, but it's an impressive technical achievement and an essential part of Brazilian gaming history that deserves your respect and adoration for the sheer fact that it exists in the first place. I'd actually say go buy a copy, but sadly, when it does pop up online, it sells for hundreds and hundreds of pounds. meaning that even Big Daddy Top Hat is missing this physical delight. Anyway, which port of Street Fighter 2 do you think deserves some more attention? Let me know in the comment section and I shall consider covering it on here. If you enjoyed this one, check out last week's upload on the unlicensed NES port of the game. Cheerio.